In 865 AD, the Great Heathen Army landed in England, united under the leadership of Ivar the Boneless, to avenge his father and perhaps greatest Viking in history, Danish King Ragnar Lothbrok. Described as the heathen army of hateful memory, all of Northumbria was reduced to subjugation in a single devastating blow. But the Vikings were more than just bloodhungry pagans who slaughtered for the love of the game. They were a culture that shaped Scandinavia into the countries we see today. In this video, we'll explore some of the greatest Vikings who stem from a Denmark far bigger than today. Harald Bluetooth, also known as Harald Gormson, is believed to have been born around 910 near Jelling in central Jutland. He was the youngest son of Gorm the Old and Thyra Danebod, who ruled as king and queen of a separated Danish kingdom. Harald's older brother, Cnut The Great, was favored by the father until a raiding trip to Dublin went south as he was shot with a coward's arrow while drunk and ultimately died. This made Harald the heir to the Danish throne, and around 958 he became a king with immense ambitions. He envisioned a unified Denmark just as his father did, and already in 965 did he raise the large Jelling runestone, which would become one of the most important historical monuments in Scandinavia, and is therefore often referred to as Denmark's birth certificate. It stated that Harald had won all of Denmark and Norway, an accomplishment he hadn't finished entirely, but through great political achievements, he managed to fulfill his declaration sometime afterwards. Another declaration on the stone claimed he had Christianized Denmark. Around the mid-960s, he accepted baptism and publicly aligned the Danish monarchy with Christianity. This did not mean that all Danes suddenly abandoned pagan beliefs, but it marked a major turning point. Christianity gave Harald stronger political legitimacy and connected Denmark to the wider Christian world of Europe. Between about 970 and 980, he oversaw the construction of the famous ring fortresses, including Trelleborg, Firkat, Agersborg. These fortresses were carefully planned and almost identical in design, showing that Harald commanded resources, labor, and military organization on a large scale. It is even believed Harald constructed Jomsborg, the semi-legendary Viking stronghold at the southern coast of the Baltic Sea in modern-day Poland. But around 985 or 986, Harald is believed to have died, fighting a rebellion led by his son, Sweyn Forkbeard, who then ruled as king after him. Although Harald's reign ended in conflict, he left behind an immense legacy. His reign marked the turning point not just for Denmark, but a large part of Scandinavia, turning it from an uncivilized kingdom of split regions into a unified and stronger Denmark. Ivar Ragnarsson, also known as Ivar the Boneless, is believed to have been the son of Ragnar Lothbrok, whose historical existence remains disputed since he is widely considered more legend than historical fact. But according to the saga Tale of Ragnar Lothbrok, Ivar was the brother of Björn Ironside, Halfdan, Sigurd Snake in the Eye, and Ragnvald, who were all respected Vikings in their own right. Ivar's bonelessness was said to be the result of a curse. As explained in the saga, his mother, Aslaug, Ragnar's third wife, was described as a Völva, a seeress with prophetic abilities. After Ragnar returned from raiding in England, Aslaug urged him to wait 3 nights before consummating their marriage, but Ragnar couldn't help himself and ignored her warning. As a result, Ivar was born with weak bones, which is largely believed to have been the reason for his nickname, the Boneless. Another theory suggests that Ivar was originally known as the Hated, which in Latin would be exosus, something a medieval scribe with limited knowledge of Latin may have misread, giving rise to the epithet the Boneless. But despite the saga's frequent mention of Ivar's physical disability, they also emphasize his wisdom, cunning, and mastery of strategy and tactics in battle. In 865, he led the Great Heathen Army, along with his brothers, to wreak revenge against Aella of Northumbria, who had supposedly executed Ragnar by throwing him in a snake pit. Ivar's forces landed in the Kingdom of East Anglia, where they met little resistance and moved on to Northumbria, where they captured the capital city of York in 866. Aella initially managed to avoid capture, but in a second battle, in March 867, he was not so lucky. According to some accounts, the vengeful Vikings subjected Aella to a particularly gruesome torture execution known as the Blood Eagle. Ivar then led the Vikings to Nottingham in the Kingdom of Mercia, only to withdraw to York without a fight. In 869, they recrossed Mercia and returned to East Anglia, where they defeated King Edmund. But Ivar apparently did not participate in the unsuccessful Viking campaign to take Wessex from King Alfred in the 870s. Instead, he renewed his partnership with Olaf the White and invaded what is now Scotland, where they destroyed Dumbarton, capital of the Strathclyde Kingdom, in 870, granting Ivar the title King of the Norsemen of all Ireland and Britain. Ivar is believed to have died in 873, most likely due to his skeletal condition. According to the saga, Ivar ordered that he be buried in a place vulnerable to attack, foretelling that as long as his grave remained undisturbed, any enemies who invaded the land would fail, a prophecy that actually proved true until William the Bastard, later known as William I of England, arrived. He is said to have opened Ivar's burial mound and found that the body had not decayed. William then ordered a great pyre to be built and had Ivar's remains burned. Only after this, the saga says, was he able to continue the invasion and secure victory. Furthermore, such Scandinavian burial mound was found in 1686, close to a battle site where the Great Heathen Army overthrew the Mercian king Burgred. In the end, Ivar the Boneless became one of the most accomplished and undoubtedly most feared Vikings in history. Despite his physical disability, he rose to become a king and led one of the most notorious armies ever assembled, driven by an almost cinematic desire for revenge. Of course, it is important to remember that much of what we know about Ivar is based on speculation, meaning his story cannot be fully trusted. Cnut the Great was born in 990 as the second son of Danish king Sweyn Forkbeard and the grandson of Polish ruler Mieszko I. From a young age, he accompanied his father on frequent Viking raids to England, including the invasion in 1013, where he was even left in charge of the fleet at Gainsborough in Lincolnshire, which is believed to have been a success, as Cnut's father had officially taken England and was accepted as king by the end of 1013. However, victory didn't last long, as Sweyn died in February the next year, and although the crown should have fallen to Cnut, the English quickly invited their old king back, Ethelred the Unready. Cnut tried fighting back, but ultimately abandoned his allies before sailing back to Denmark, leaving behind countless mutilated hostages as a brutal warning of what was to come. And in 1015, Cnut returned to England, kickstarting a long and violent war against Edmund Ironside, the fierce son of Ethelred, until in 1016, when Earl Uhtred of Northumbria submitted to Cnut, only for Cnut to murder him in his own home anyways. This split England in two, where one part of the English council declared Cnut king, while London and its supporters backed Edmund. This divide continued until 1016, when Edmund apparently died. The cause was unknown, but due to a history of assassinating opponents, Cnut is suspected as the murderer. According to 12th century writers, Edmund was stabbed while sitting on a toilet, which is, however, unlikely to be true. Either way, Cnut became king of all England and initially ruled like a conqueror by handing English land to his Danish followers, arranging the death of Edmund's brother Edwig and ordering English nobles to be killed or exiled. But surprisingly, that wasn't the whole story of his reign. Over time, Cnut changed from a brutal invader into a skilled ruler. By 1018, English nobles were once again holding major positions of power, and the Danish presence in his inner circle began to fade. He dismissed much of his fleet, made peace between Danes and English at Oxford, and began ruling more like an English king than a foreign warlord. Cnut brought peace and stability to England after years of chaos. But Cnut's ambitions didn't stop with England. He also fought to control Denmark and Norway, building a North Sea empire. He secured the Danish throne, dealt with rebellions, and faced challenges from Sweden and Norway. Even after setbacks, he kept expanding his power. In 1028, he drove the Norwegian king Olaf II out of the country and placed his own allies in charge. Back in England, his reign was mostly peaceful. One of the few major disruptions was his campaign in Scotland in 1027, where he forced recognition from 3 Scottish kings. Trade flourished under his rule, especially because he controlled key Baltic trade routes. That gave England and Denmark a huge economic advantage. Cnut was also skilled in diplomacy. On a journey to Rome in 1027, he attended the coronation of Holy Roman Emperor Conrad II and negotiated lower tolls for English merchants and pilgrims. Denmark benefited too, gaining territory near Schleswig and north of the Eider River. By the time of his death in 1035, Cnut had transformed himself from a Viking conqueror into one of the most powerful rulers in Europe. But his sons couldn't live up to his legacy. In 1042, England returned to its old royal line, and Denmark passed to Sweyn II, showcasing just how impressive he was. These were only a few of the many great Vikings from Denmark, so if you want a second part, let me know in the comments. Otherwise, consider subscribing if you want to learn more about a time when war wasn't fought through a remote controller.